Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and as you guys saw from my training footage earlier today, and I'll roll a bunch of it up here so that you guys can watch me perform the exercise while I discuss this, I can actually speak a little bit further on these supine Pendlay rows now that I've incorporated them into my routine. And some people were kind of like, why are you incorporating those? And well, because it makes sense. I did see what Mark Ripto had to say about them, and as soon as I heard that he was advocating them, and keep in mind, guys, I don't automatically agree with everything Mark Ripto says. We disagree on some things about squats and stuff, but I think overall he's a good coach. He's a competent coach. He has a lot of experience, and a lot of what he does teach makes a lot of sense. A lot of it does. I'd say 95% of it. 95% of it makes a lot of sense for general strength, for field athletes, things like that. So he knows what he's talking about. And as soon as someone asked about a supine Pendlay row, even before I saw his video, I had stepped back and said, you know what, that makes a lot of sense. It actually makes sense as an exercise. And for a strength athlete, whether you're a strength athlete, whether you're using it as a deadlift accessory, or whether you're someone who's using it as one of your bicep building and grip building tools, the exercise makes sense. And that's the things that I noticed when I went to do it. As far as some different things go, I found it to be slightly easier than a conventional Pendlay row in terms of what I would consider RPE, like rate of perceived exertion, doing sets of 8 with 225 from a dead stop on the floor. Honestly, I felt like I probably could have done similar sets, and it feels about honestly 10 pounds lighter than doing the same weight with a normal Pendlay row with a double overhand grip. So in terms of overall performance, that makes sense. And the reason that's the case is the same reason that on a chin-up, most people are slightly stronger on a chin-up than they are on a pull-up. Why? Because the latissimus dorsi gets just as much recruitment with an overhand grip and an underhand grip. It doesn't work any more or any less. There's no reason to think that it will. However, the biceps with an underhand grip, with a supine grip, get more involved. And so when you have a muscle like the secondary muscle like a bicep or a tricep or anything else on a big lift, if they can be engaged and recruited harder due to an angle, you're going to be able to lift more weight because you get an additive effect. And that's what people need to remember when they start talking about lat work and biceps. They oftentimes say, no, I don't want my arms to do the work because it'll take away from my back. No, it won't. Not if it lets you lift more weight. If you're stronger because you get more bicep recruitment, the biceps are adding to the workload. They're not reducing from the amount of work you're doing. And they certainly, if it lets you add more weight more comfortably, or it lets you add range of motion with the same weight, which is oftentimes the case with the chin-up, you have a slightly stronger range of motion, a longer range of motion. So you're doing slightly more work on every rep at the same body weight or the same amount of plates added. Well, the idea there is that the biceps are just getting extra work. They're not reducing the amount of work the lats are doing by any means. And so that's the thing I noticed with this lift, is that you're not at risk of tearing a bicep because you're not getting that jerky stretch at the bottom. And that's where, when you're doing a standing row where people have torn biceps while standing because they cheat row. And if you're cheating and then you're getting a negative at the bottom that cheats and jerks that muscle at the bottom, you're risking tearing it because you're putting it at a position to where the bicep gets strained and stretched relatively hard, and then you're cheating with a weight you're too heavy to lift with strict form. It jerks back down, and then it at the base, when you get to the bottom of the pull on that bicep, you've got a really heavy weight. That's just people who could probably only strict row 200 pounds, putting 300 on and doing cheat reps. Well, if you think about that, think of that stress at the bottom of the bicep. People tear biceps doing that. With a Pendlay row, that's not the case. Yeah, it's stretched at the bottom, but it's not putting that same strain on it. Now, what's interesting is that the bicep is extended at the bottom and it's being put in a strong position where it has to work. But because you're not pre-stretching it with a negative on the lower end because you hit the floor before it gets stretched to that extent, you are forcing the bicep to contract from a full stretch with a relatively heavy load from the bottom while locked out. I'm going to go out on a limb and say I think this exercise, because of that, has a lot of potential for the deadlift, for carryover to the deadlift. Why? Because it's going to reduce the chance of a bicep tear. You're training your bicep to be stronger on a concentric rep from a dead pull, like a dead stretch at the bottom, right? If you think about the Pendlay, that bicep's in the same position it is at the bottom of a deadlift on your supinated hand. That's going to train the bicep to be stronger and be resilient in that position. By doing so, it's going to reduce the chance that you're going to tear a bicep when performing a deadlift. I think it's a good prehab exercise to reduce your chance of a bicep tear on the deadlift. And it makes sense when you look at it from that perspective and you look at the biomechanics. It will actually strengthen you against that. So it's a good thing there. The other thing that I noticed is the grip difference. You guys will notice when I'm doing these on the different sets, notice between reps, sometimes I have to re-grip the bar. Why? Because it is difficult to grip. All right, so a secondary exercise like the Pendlay row that I'm doing for volume, 3 sets of 8, that's volume training. We're pretty much in the hypertrophy range, and I don't like that term, but we'll use the term that people use. 3 sets of 8 with a moderate weight. We're definitely dealing with hypertrophy training at that point. Now, it has an explosive component because I'm lifting it explosively. I'm pulling from a dead stop. So yes, it is explosive training. We're dealing with hypertrophy work. There's a fair amount of volume there. It is very tough on your forearms and your grip. All right, you actually have to grip the bar relatively hard to hold on to it. So what does that mean? That means this row, even a Pendlay row, is going to be a fantastic grip accessory. This is going to be a great grip trainer because what do I always tell people? Why do a lot of people have struggle with their grip? Because they use straps, and not just straps for anything. They reduce their volume. Grip deals with your forearms, and forearms are oftentimes have a very strong stamina-oriented aspect to them because of the muscle fiber distribution. They tend to be a little bit more stamina-oriented. So not only do they handle volume better, they respond to volume slightly better in the sense of you need more volume to get ideal fatigue. So people who are strapping up too much or at all, they're dramatically reducing the volume that their grip and therefore their forearms and everything else are subjected to. Now, when you're doing something like this with relatively high volume, and it is taking a fair amount of grip work. I mean, after deadlifting, I'm going to say, I definitely noticed that it was harder to grip than a standard Pendlay row. Definitely more difficult to grip than the double overhand grip, to do it with a supine grip. So what's that going to translate to? Well, if you're doing it as an accessory exercise and you're doing it once you're fatigued in a workout and it's working your grip a lot, not to the point to where you can't grip it. It's not like you're losing stimulation from it, but it is working your grip, and it's working your grip to fatigue. That's going to transfer over to a stronger grip. So if we're talking about improving your deadlift performance, the supine Pendlay row really makes a lot of sense because it trains a lot of the same muscles, especially the back, to pull explosively from the floor. You're getting bicep work that is almost prehab that should reduce your injury chance on the deadlift, and you're getting a stronger grip work than you would get with a double overhand grip. That's going to translate to an improved deadlift and a safer deadlift, isn't it? Of course it is. Now, you combine that with the fact that you're getting more bicep work in while getting the same amount of back work. Well, that's exercise efficiency. And how many people out there do you know who say they don't want bigger biceps? Let's be realistic. 99% of guys who lift weights right now, I don't care what your goal is. Wouldn't mind a little bit more bicep. You don't have to be a bodybuilder to say, hey, I want a little bit bigger arms. Yeah. Even power lifters, even football players oftentimes go, well, I want a little bit more bicep. This is going to give you that. You're getting for the same number of sets and reps on what you're doing with an accessory exercise. It's going to transfer over to other things. You are getting free bicep work already thrown in. Now that's exercise efficiency, because if anything, anytime you have a muscle that you know you really want to bring up a little bit, if you can train it for free, doing accessory work and exercises you were already going to do for another purpose, that's a win all the way around. That's a win. Me personally, I'm going to go out on a limb and say, we know I need a little more bicep. I already do a lot of chin-ups. Now I'm adding a second compound accessory movement that tremendously recruits the biceps. This might actually help me break across that threshold, get that higher amount of bicep volume in every week that stimulates growth, because we all know volume, training volume and workload is one of the most important factors for muscle growth. So I'm getting that from it. So will anyone who does this. So for me, this might end up ultimately leading to another ½ inch of bicep eventually. And I'm already doing an exercise, Pendlay rows, that I was already going to do. That's an all-around win. I'm getting extra grip work, extra bicep work, while performing a back exercise I was basically going to do a variation of anyways. You can't beat that. And it makes sense to do it. And now that I've done it, I can honestly tell you, as far as the grip training components of it and the feeling that my biceps are definitely working on it, absolutely. In fact, I'm going to go out on a limb and say the grip end of it was actually stronger than I thought it was going to be. Like, as far as noticing me having to work my grip on this exercise, it was very noticeable, like more than I actually expected. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. So that's kind of my synopsis so far. I'm going to continue to use these in my routine. I'll update you guys on it as far as things go, and we'll watch over time during this cut and everything else and see if I get any more bicep development from it. I think I probably will in the long term if I do it long enough. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.